Okay, hi. So this is a practice session. It will be very short. I'm having a lot of issues with my recording. I don't know if I should buy a microphone, especially for this. Basically, I have a hard time understanding what I'm saying when I'm listening to checking out my video. So hopefully this settings work. I'm just going to do a very rough beginning of inking on this character I just sketched. So it will be at the same time, because the sketch is very rough, a little bit of tightening of the lines. So we'll see how it goes. All right, so just zooming in, I'm going to try to find. mm, Actually, I have a brush I like here, but I'm not sure I want to use that. This brush works pretty well in monochrome. I notice that if I'm using grayscale, it sort of gets a little bit too grayish, and I want a crisp line. I'm going to do just a little bit of tryout and warm up. Obviously, there is a little bit, way too much, actually, correction on this brush. I don't know if I can fix it actually. Um, let's see. No, I don't want to waste too much time. So first off, let's get a little bit of free space here. That will help. And I have a texture pen that I also kind of like. It's not quite as dirty, so that should do it. Do I have enough stabilization? I should not use stabilization a lot, but since these are hard shapes, hard edges, um, I kind of don't want my line to feel, yeah, it's a little too shaky. All right, let's see. All right, so the trade-off here is that I actually have to go pretty slow inking. Usually, if I do a general outline for a character, and if I know that I'm going to do color later, let me stop drawing for a second. I need to concentrate. I try to do fairly thick outlines that might not even be thick enough. I have a navigator window that shows me exactly my drawing on a second monitor. The reason I'm doing this is because the picture, let me bring it here in the front. The picture here is much smaller, so I can actually see a little bit better what my drawing is going to look like at a smaller size. Um, as you might notice, I am not going inside the character too much. I am staying on the edges and I'm keeping very bold strokes as much as I can, as bold as I can make them. There's a reason for this, which is that I will get to a point, actually, I might demonstrate that next. Um, I am going to get to a point where I'm going to block some areas in the drawing for future coloring. So basically, I'm setting what uh, the usual term is my flats, which means that I am going to color inside specific areas. And the way it works, it's nice, but if you have too many, let's say, little scratchy line everywhere and texturing and cross hatching. Well, when you're using a color fill tool, what's going to happen is that it's going to have a hard time. So the way I work is, and I'm learning Studio Paint, so I'm still doing my best to try to avoid making stupid decisions and wasting time down the line. I will make my general outline first, and then I will fill the color once I'm happy with my outline. The smaller, scratchy inking lines, I will basically make them later, or I make them on a separate layer that I might merge after with my general outline. But right now, I am not going to do all of this. Uh, I should be inking that weapon, but the thing is that it's not fully designed. I'm not happy with it, and I don't think it helps with this video anyway. So I'm going to cheat. I'm not going to finish the ink completely. I am going to focus on just the general area on the top before we start with the weapon. I have something here which is basically I need to do a straight line that looks very technical. I could, all right, so one of the tricks is to just draw your line really, really fast. But as you can see, it's not completely straight. It might be okay at some scale on some types of objects, but this I don't like it. Also, I could. There is a tool here which basically allows you to draw straight lines. My problem with this is that then my line is pretty much one width, one density. So I don't like this. One thing I can do more easily is basically create a linear ruler. The advantage with the linear ruler is that I will actually be drawing on top of it. So I can control my speed, my density, uh, and therefore I can control the thickness of my line. For example, I could have a much thicker line, much thinner, or I could vary to try to sort of make it look not so perfect. I am going, normally I should be able to also draw any line that is parallel to that ruler. Am I? Nope. Basically, that first one here was just lucky. So I'm going to actually select my line here. I'm going to cheat. And uh, actually, since there's a little bit of perspective, I'm just going to modify it just a tiny bit. And I will add an extra ruler here because I also want to have my, okay, where is it? Okay, I'm going to make a, oh, figure ruler, I'm sorry. So figure rulers, I can select, okay, I have an oval selected. So I'm just going to make a basic oval here. Right now it's a circle. And with this tool here, let me let me undo and do it again. What happened is that it was not validated, I guess. So it made my screen scroll at the same time. I'm going back to my editing tool here. And yeah, that is an issue, is that selecting, you have to click inside your figure, otherwise won't find it. It requires some precision, so you have to really look at what icons are appearing. So I'm just gonna do this. I'm just going to flatten the side. My perspective. This is variable, uh, and now normally I should be able to, yeah, follow this line. I have an other oval I want to use, so I'm going to. I could make a new one, but I can just use this one just as well. That is, if I can grab it. Sorry. Whew. I noticed with this my tablet, it's harder to pick stuff than with the mouse. So, anyways, no big deal. I'm going to make a much bigger one. So, when you do this, you lose a little bit of the character of your line, because it's just like tracing with the French curve. When you're doing traditional art, it's basically it doesn't look as natural as when you draw your line by hand, but you just have to cheat and fiddle around and see what's the best solution for you. Uh, I personally kind of like that it's helping me, so great. I just need to move this thing up a little bit so it matches better. You know, you sort of have to aim for the center of your line. All right. So, so see, I'm doing like a second pass here because I, I want my line to show some variety. That's all. I'm going against my rule, which is basically I'm starting to draw something that's a little too thin, but it doesn't really matter. My plan was to sort of block this area off here. So I'm using Command 2 to unsnap my ruler. So now I should be able to do freehand. Yeah. I also don't like to see my ruler when I'm done with it or when I don't want to see it. It's really annoying. So I can go to my ruler and I can hide it. So it's still here. It is just that it is not active and it's not visible. So this is fine for me. This is perfect. This is not the best armor design ever. Something I did very quickly. I was doing a test with the 3D uh, material components where you can post characters, and I ended up making a character silhouette. Uh, Maybe I can show you. Yeah. So basically, I had just based on model. I noticed that something I found out a couple of days ago is that when you do your perspective with a 3D character, you can actually use the perspective as perspective rulers, and so you can draw stuff by hand as far as setting up the background and stuff like that. Let me show you. See, so I was pretty excited by that, and I thought it was cool. So anyway, I drew some clothing on top of the character, and as they say, one thing leading to another. I ended up with this. So now I do actually have areas that I could color, which I could create flats for. So I'm going to do that right now, just to continue my quick test slash demonstration. So what you do, I'm saying a lot of I hesitated a lot. It's probably pretty annoying. Anyway, something that's very useful also is if you name your layers. There is always a point when I do a piece, whether it's in Photoshop or now Clip Studio Paint. Um, there's a point where I get sort of lost and confused. So this is usually when I take a few minutes and I name my layers, at least the ones I'm using. This one would be ink outline, and this would be my pencil. I have another pencil floating around somewhere else, which I will need to merge with this layer, but for now it's okay. So I'm going to my flats, selecting the color fill, and if I wanted to follow my layer, my outline, I have to go to my outline layer and I have to click this icon here, which is basically it will make this a reference layer. Then I go to my flats layer. I'm going to select a color that is not too disruptive, usually darker than it should be, more desaturated than it should be in final, or even a color that's totally different from the final results you're trying to achieve. The reason is that you you just are going to need this just a selectable zone on top of which you can create layers where you can do your painting. So it's more like a technical layer that you're using as a easy, quick selection reference. So okay, let me check the properties of my fill. Following adjacent pixel, close gap is on. Multiple referring is on, so I should, and it's set to refer to the reference layer. So let's try to fill it. Yep, it's working. So I've got my helmet here, and I'm going to select a slightly different tone for this part of the armor. And that should be enough for my current needs. I have set this layer as a multiply layer because if I put it to normal, obviously it's on top of all the other layers, so it's going to hide everything else, which is not something I want. But the main reason, because I could put it under my line layers, I would be fine. But I have so much stuff going on right now, couple layers on that still need to blend, merge. So it's just easier to have it on top, and I go there a lot. And once I'm finished, when I've consolidated my inks, at that point, it's completely fine if I put it as a normal and put it behind the ink line. Another reason is that when you erase stuff, sometimes you can be tempted to use the white color to interrupt your black line, which is useless because you have also a transparent ink that works just as well. But unfortunately, sometimes I forget, so I'll be using white, and then I'll put my flat layer under my ink, and I will start seeing white spots covering the color, so it kind of sucks. I am just going to draw a few extra lines here. I need to be in a new layer, which, okay, let's take a good habit. I could say ink, L, why not? See what happens here. Zoom in a lot because for some reason I can see what I'm doing today. Cintiq is pretty small. It's 12 inch, and I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired, but maybe I need new glasses. It's possible too. But I really, really, really need to be pretty close to see what I'm doing, which is sad. I should do something about this. Anyway, it's okay. So this is an area where I can afford to have thinner lines. It won't matter as much as the contouring lines, and they should be thinner. They can be also a little bit more organic, so a bit more fun for me to draw that. Just for the record, uh, I never, ever, ever do armor. It's actually like the first time in maybe like, I don't know, 3, 4 years that I'm trying to draw armor in a drawing. I've done a couple of character concepts with some sort of armor, but it was in Photoshop and it was painting. It was like fairly realistic rendering. The process is completely different from the comic book illustration process. I'm also much, much, much more trained in color and painting because I've done a lot of that in the last few years. Anyway, long story short, pretty much I'm doing this, I'm inking this, and it's hard, mechanical, technical shape, and honestly, I have no idea how to do that. So I'm sure I'm going to screw up a lot, but it's a good exercise. It's fun. That's what matters really. As long as you learn stuff as you go, it's great. I'm going to add a little bit of texturing on parts that are a little bit more softer. I have no idea if they make anything that looks like that in the real world. Actually, probably not. Got soft parts on the helmet where maybe it shouldn't be soft. I don't know. Whatever. It's fun. Allows me to try out my inking on something different. For me, uh, I like to draw like people in civilian clothing and doing like superhero stuff, whatever. It's mostly when I do comic book style stuff. It's really just for fun. I'm working on one right now. I've been meaning to do that for a long time. I've been looking for a story that would inspire me, and I kind of found like not quite the story, but universe and some general outline of a story that I want to tell. So the last couple of weeks, I came back to Clip Studio Paint, which I had not really used. I bought it last year on, I think it was on Black Friday special. It was like super cheap. And I had used Manga Studio in the past and I liked it. So I was like, yeah, what the hell? Let's do that. Let's buy that. It could be fun when I get around to having a minute, to do my own stuff instead of working for clients or whatever, which you gotta pay the bills and you also get to do interesting stuff. But mostly my work is production, art management, um, sometimes art direction, not so much anymore. Getting very self-conscious about giving people direction, especially when you see my drawing level right now. Who am I to criticize, right? So anyway, and I do a lot of 3D, video game stuff. But it's really refreshing for me when I can get back and just draw in a more traditional way. See, so I'm talking and I'm starting to sort of be a little bit more looser in what I'm doing. It's a good thing. It's a bad thing. It's a good thing because sometimes you have happy surprises, and it's always nice when you're not stressed out about what you're drawing or painting. It's cool. But I, I noticed when that as I'm trying to do mechanical heart heart shapes, you sort of have to remember that you are doing something that's mechanical, and you have to be a little bit precise. It's okay if you do like I'm doing here, like some stuff that's covered with some sort of a fabric. It's okay, it's fine. I can just completely zone out and listen to music and try to talk on my video, which is something new for me. But if you really want to do hardships, like look at that mess here. It's like I'm going over my lines. It's just like just a mess. It could be all right. It depends on the final inking and the shading are going to go. But I I should be more careful for sure. All right, it's Saturday afternoon. I have nothing better to do right now than just doodling and trying to record and practice recording videos. I've been wanting to do that for a long time, never got around to doing this, and it's kind of fun. It kind of makes me talk and think more about what I'm doing, just talking about it. It's very strange. So, trying to do a little bit more of it. I don't know if anything will come out of that. Um, Maybe I'll try to do tutorials on a couple of things that topics that I know pretty well. I'm sorry, I'm coughing. Maybe I'll just do some um, live streaming at some point. I don't. I really have no idea. It's cool, whatever. So I am just putting some glass-ish material here. I don't really know where I'm going with this anyway. Just trying to break the monotony. Don't know if it will work at all. It should probably be at bolder lines. I have no idea what this thing is supposed to reflect, uh, other than the fact that she's standing somewhere in the city that looks like it's been blown up or something. So total improv. Anyway, uh, yeah, it's terrible. It's a bit more subtle, and then I am going to go with my transparent brush and maybe use some sort of something a little bit grittier, sketchy, and sort of like. All right, so see the mistake I made? I selected white instead of transparent, and right away it looked terrible. I'm just gonna scratch through that reflection so it doesn't feel so much like something hard. I might not have not keeping this at all. I don't know. Just practicing, just trying to figure out solutions. I'm definitely not an inker. I used to ink a lot when I was much younger and working on paper with India ink and brushes and quills and whatnot, but that was another lifetime, long, long time ago. So anyway, all right, let me go back to my pen, texture pen. I could do an effect here, which actually could be cool, which would be to actually ink the face of my character um, on a separate layer. Just gonna try this. Not going to go too far with it. Be fun. I don't know. So believe it or not, my character reference here is for the face is Scarlett Johansson. Just like some random photo I got off the web, just to be able to put a face that would not be too generic as an expression on the character, which initiates from, again, from a 3D model. Uh, Obviously, there's been a lot of changes since. I could have spent an extra 10 minutes trying to really draw or pencil her like she looks like Scarlett. But why? She's already casting a lot of bad stuff, so why would I add to the list? I don't know. Anyway, so I will go back into that layer and do more detailing work on it. Right now, it should be okay. I don't know if she has hair or anything visible. Doesn't matter. Let's give it just a little bit of a expression, a little bit of sculpting. This again, this I'm not doing any shading yet, and I will just, for now, I will just give this a little bit less strength. So it's 50% opacity, and I'm curious to see what happens if I hide my pencil. Okay, all right. So yeah, she needs to be a little less opaque. Okay. And if I had this, yeah, it's pretty much good opacity. Maybe it should be more opaque. No. All right. So I could have some effects here. It could be fun. My glass here. It's shit. Sorry. That thing here is just terrible. From just going to get rid of it. It doesn't matter. So I could use the eraser for areas that are not touching other lines. It's faster. I am not saying this is my last word on putting some dark shading on the glass, but maybe it would work better if I do that maybe inside the color layer with the actual layer color. So we'll see. All right. So what I was saying about flats is that if I wanted to change my flat color, I just go to the flat layer, I go to my fill. It should still be able to detect what's on its own layer, but I am going to go to my outline, make sure it's not a reference layer anymore. And now I could say, okay, let's say this is what color is this? It's bluish. Let's say I want something that's more in the red, just for the sake of argument. If I'm in my flat layer, if I fill, yeah. And you see it missed this part. Why? Because it has the option of following the adjacent pixel. If I turn it off, it will do everything. Uh, all right. Okay, so that was the right option. It just happened so that when I did my first flat, and I'm going to show it if I hide my ink outline, yeah, these are separated. That's why, so they were not reaching each other. I could use a different selection to achieve recoloring the whole area, but this is just as easy. So yeah, so you get the idea. And on top of this flat, I I will be able to start doing some shading. I still need to do more, a little bit more detail though in my ink. I'm just gonna go really, really fast. Again, I'm just practicing my. Okay, so I'm still in transparent mode, or that's red color mode. Just adding a little bit of stuff. Yeah, so this is really where I am jumping the shark in terms of inking things that should look like hard surfaces. I should spend I should be a bit more precise, a little bit more focused. But on the final result, it might still work. So we'll see. See this? So that's why I'm using the textured pen. As you can see, it makes for an inking result that is not too clean. It really has sort of an organic, inking on paper feel. Is not perfect. I sometimes like this much better than just ink that would be too smooth and too clean. It just sometimes makes for a more interesting result. I guess that would be a way to put it. All right. Okay. Because I got some detail here. I could have more, but usually this is when I'm done with my basic ink outline and with the ink detail. Right now, I'm just working on this part for which I have applied color. I'm not going to even do everything in here. Uh, Usually, the next thing I do is I'm sort of trying to plan my shading. It's much more important to me than any other part of rendering. Once I have my shading figured out, it really gives me a guide within the volume to know pretty much what I need to do next for each, you know, adding detail in color, doing highlights, selecting my final colors, all that stuff. I just find that when I have my shading figured out, it's just much easier. By shading, I usually have two choices. One of my choices of shading is basically if I'm doing something that's really um, almost like expressionist, with really strong uh, spots of black. Usually, I will just spot my black. I will just do like big shading like this. And if I do second level of shading in the color, it will be something that will be much more subtle, of course, to sort of accompany the the shadow transitions, kind of like that. Another way of doing it, to me, which I've been trying to use more recently, because I tend to make too much of art with really super dark spotted big blacks everywhere, which is cool if you're good at it, if your name is Will Eisner or Frank Miller, or if you've been studying Alex stuff and all these great guys, Melton Caniff, Hugo Pratt, you're gonna be really good. It's a great exercise. You can even like hide your lines completely and just keep the black spots. And if you're good at it, your art should look great. Even better without the line art, just the spots of black and white. But something that I'm finding is that I'm trying to make my art a little bit lighter and brighter. So I'm trying to make my shading in a much brighter, much lighter. So basically, I make it in a different layer now. I'm still going to paint in black, except that I'm going to set my uh, layer to brightness. So basically, it won't affect the color under it. It will just affect the value of the colors under it. And I'm setting it up. It really depends. Like I start around 50%. This is a good opportunity when I do this to uh, do a really kind of dirty, gritty texture. I made a brush and called Gritty Monochrome Marker. It works pretty well, but the thing is, it works much better in monochrome mode than in color or gray mode. So I'm going to start spotting my. So the process is still the same. I still have to spot my blacks, um, but see, it's kind of adds a lot of teeth to the texture. It's not clean, so it's something I really like personally. I've not figured out my light lighting completely yet. So, and of course, I'm gonna have to go back in and clean it and all that good stuff. But right now, I'm really doing, like the main, figuring out my main volume. Assuming my light is coming from a little bit above and a little bit to the right of the character. Uh, for some cast shadow from that belt here. Not going too detailed because at some point I am actually going to go in into this same layer when everything is pretty much figured out, and I will refine and clean my lines. But right now, I don't really need to do that. I'm just gonna show a little example though. So go back to my texture band, like something that I will do. I will go in here and just like soften and detail some parts. And some parts I will just leave like super rough. So the general ensemble, I guess, impression will be that there will be some irregularity, some organic aspects to to my lines. Won't look like too blurry and smooth. This actually should be in the shadow, but maybe it's like I don't know. Maybe there's some sort of mesh under it. I don't know. It's cool because if I can only ask myself, and if I don't have the answer, I don't have it. See, I'm doing this again. Um, just moving some stuff here. So basically, that's a point where basically you're just having fun and you're just sort of sculpting into your art and seeing what works, what doesn't work. The very satisfying part. It's fun. You can sort of I'm gonna do a little bit of a rim light here. I don't have to do a rim light right now. Rim light is basically a secondary light source. It could come from, let's say, from behind the character. I'm just doing it now because that's where I am. Rim lights will also help you sort of figure out the structure of your volume better, especially when you cover it with shadows and stuff like that. Adding a little bit of noise here. Honestly, I have no idea why. Thinking maybe it would make it look more battered, I guess. And bringing back to black here. Just shading here a little bit. So one thing I'm noticing uh, pretty quickly is that it's a little too harsh. So I'm lowering my opacity so it won't be so disruptive, if that makes sense. All right. So let's see. Just adding a little bit of detail wherever I think the shadows should fall. Very forgiving because you're working on a separate layer. So if you screw up, it's not a big deal. You can always go back and fix it. It's always a hard exercise for me to choose between, I don't know why, what looks cool and organic and whatever, and what looks visually, optically correct. I know that that should be the same thing, but sometimes it's not. And since I'm doing a lot of 3D and working a lot with things that are supposed to be realistic and almost be able to work in the real world if they had to, because when you do 3D, you get uh, perspective comes built in, and consistency comes built in, and lighting comes consistent lighting, not good lighting necessarily, but it comes built in, and you don't really have to. You sort of take it for granted when you're granted. When you're doing art, 2D, when comic stuff, it's not exactly the same thing. And it just happened that, there's a trade off between realism and physical correctness and, looking cool and sometimes even looking convincing because sometimes you can be very correct. Uh, in, I'll try to take an example, but you can use a 3D character like I did for that one and say, hey, it's all right. I can just um, I can just cheat and I can just where was I? Sorry. I It's going to look okay because I'm using a 3D model. I'm going to just trace over that 3D model and it's going to be great. That's the truth on paper. Sometimes that's not the case. It will look more correct, but it will be, I guess, sterile, hollow, boring. So I'm doing some shadow from the helmet onto the lady's face, which actually ends up looking completely wrong because now it looks like she's wearing a hood. So probably if I do any shading on her face, we'll have to use maybe like a different layer with a different uh, opacity level. I'm not sure. So I'm just going to leave it alone for now. I'm going to try to cheat a little here and see if it does anything to my shadow. If I just sculpt inside it, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. All right. For now, I'm leaving it as is. And I'm just going to do one extra pass. So I want to be sure that I am, let me move my shading. I should name it properly. Let me move it under the the inks. I should also move my ink outline to the very top because it makes no sense for it to be all the way down after all. Okay, and on top of my shading and under my inks, I am going to just ever so slightly work on a few highlights. It's the same way you create a new layer. Let's call it like highlight ones, highlights one. I'm going to use brightness. Could use other modes, but brightness is fine for me. I'm going to select a white, and normally if I draw on this, let me just hide my pencil. It's distracting at this point. Yeah, I'm going to get. Well, obviously I did not select a white. I selected the black. Yeah. All right. So maybe I can use this to do like the hard highlights. See how it works. Okay. So my light source coming from the top. It should be something like this. Yeah. So this is a hard-ish part. This is not metal, I think. This is the hard part. So you just sort of want to catch where the light's coming from. You can do some rendering to soften them. Sometimes I use tricks like like watercolor with the blur and smoothing the lines on top of each other and all that stuff, which is fine. But at the end of the day, there's so much blurry stuff that what ends up happening is the art looks super soft. So I, I sort of like to start from something that's fairly defined. And the way I do my softening and my smoothing is basically just layering lines uh, instead of like this feathering, I guess. All right. So I got lights coming all the way here. I sort of doubt that this hard highlight will reach all the parts. I have a little bit of metal here, so that's acceptable. Uh, Again, you don't need to be completely correct. Uh, this would make sense, but I like it better here. Just going to use the highlight to show that there's a fold here. Okay. I'm not going to record much longer. I sort of got caught up into uh, drawing. I just wanted to do a 5 minute test. Anyway, it's okay. Again, I got nothing better to do right now. So, oh yeah, well, maybe I should go and get some groceries. That would be nice too. Anyway, so yeah, that's too much. Doesn't make any sense here. Just shading here, and I noticed I should have a cast shadow, so I'm gonna do that right now. Going back to my shadows layer, and I have some sort of cast shadow here from that chin piece. All right, so not absolute cast shadow from everything, but it should be a little bit better than this. Okay. All right. I'm having fun, so that's a good thing. I'm going back to my highlights, selecting white, and obviously the contrast is like super strong. Okay, I'm aware of that. It it's because I've not played with opacity. Basically, I just want to bring my basic highlights to sort of that level. It's funny, my helmet has so much fabric on it. It looks like sort of a mix of a like a hazmat suit and their nurse's hat, sort of strange. Anyway, it's very soft. That is not going to go for submissions anywhere. But okay, fully exercise is fine. It's a great thing also about working digitally is that you can always, redo stuff from scratch when you have to. You don't have to just throw your piece of paper in the trash. But it's okay. It's fine. I'm not, I'm not trying to show off here. I mean, I'm just saying that now that I'm realizing that it's not really good. Anyway, and like a little trick I picked up, and I'm going to finish with this, is that when I do the coloring part, I'm going to go, it will be easier to explain when I'm in my flats folder. I am going to select just this color. Yep. All right. And one little trick I found, and for it to render a little bit better, I will deselect all the parts that are actually not parts of the helmet. So selection selected. Oops. I really like the lasso tool, and Manga Studio. I keep saying Manga Studio because the software is also called Clip Studio Paint, as you probably know. It's also called Manga Studio, depending, I guess, who you're talking to, or if you purchased it as a download or ordered a box. The software has a different name. No idea why. Maybe it's for legal reasons. Who knows? On a ship. So right now I have my color that matches the helmet selected. I don't like that it's breaking in parts, but it's okay. No big deal. All right. Thank you. Okay. Let me select this. And okay, so the little trick I found, which I really like, is that I'm going to apply a color, more final color to the helmet. I'm going to make, I could do it inside the flat, but then things get complicated. What I could do with this selection though is create a new flat. Since I'm doing that, so I'm going to go actually in my Clip Studio Paint main menu. I'm going to go to File, Edit, sorry, Fill. Okay, all right. So I just made a new fill, so now I will be able to select it from my flats layer. All right. Anyway, so let's call that red. Helmet gradient. I found that I could actually uh, cheat, use a gradient to give a little bit more volume to specific elements of my geometry, of my area. Sorry, I do a lot of 3D, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to select a gradient. It doesn't really matter what color it is, or you can make a new one if you want your final colors. Um, let's say for example that I like the one of these gradients. Doesn't really matter actually. Gradient breaks. Okay. So I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to duplicate it. It's actually a subtool. I'm going to call it grad helmet, whatever. And I'm going to go and edit this thing.